All right, we'll make a start this evening, and you're all very welcome. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope 2024 is a good year for all of you, and hopefully for us as well here. We're delighted we have Anne-Marie Coughlan here from outside Youghal in Cork, who is a genealogist. She's going to speak to us tonight about military records, 20th century military records. Anne-Marie is a member of the APG, the Association of Professional Genealogists, as well as a fellow of Cork Genealogy Society, and she has her own genealogy business entitled Family Past. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anne-Marie.
Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you, Clare, for inviting me. My dad's family are from Cork City, and my mother's family are from Clare, possibly Galway, that we know so far. So I'm actually going to talk about my mum's family as part of this presentation. So researching the diaspora with 20th century military records. Well, I've changed it slightly because I haven't looked at this for a little while, and it's done me a lot of good. I've actually got in and I've done some more research and found out there's a lot more now than there was 5 years ago. So it's brilliant. So we're using the military records to bounce out and back into other records as well. And why I've called it in plain sight is because in my family, when I got to look for my family in the military records, there's information they're missing. And the missing bit is actually that they're Irish, which is a bit of a shock. So in plain sight is once you start looking at the records, you will find people that belong to you or that you might be interested in. And you might also find that they're Irish as well. So it depends really on what you're looking for. I'll tell you a little story later on about my grandmother's cousin who was in the Anzac. So I hope you all recognise this photograph because I took it last week up the road. What the information here, as you will know, is that there's a list of people from the counties and the townlands in Clare that are commemorated here. Now, what I'm looking at and talking about today is the people who left, or how you're going to find them and why you should want to find them. So with the recent availability of censuses, international censuses, we can actually find out what's happened to our families, and we can find out through the military records as a bounce off. And so if we've got like granddad's younger brother who took off in 1920 and I wonder what happened to them, then this could be a good place that we need to start. So what also sort of brought my attention to it was I was literally in the National Archives doing some work, and like you do, you go for a wander, and there was a big case of letters, and there were letters from people, men basically, who were in the Allied forces, who lived in Australia, in New Zealand, and the USA, who were evidently based. They'd got as far as England, and they'd evidently been given information by the parents. Go and sort this out. You're not too far from Ireland. When you get a couple of days, they'll leave. Will you go to Ireland and find the relatives? So there were all these letters from these young lads saying, we're looking for so-and-so, and their neighbours are called this, and they live down the corner by this house here, and there's a pub on the end of the road. And then there's a letter going back from the National Archives, very sorry, we can't help you, we've not got enough information. And I'm looking at these letters and thinking, right, 100 years on, we could do this, we could sort these out because we had enough information. So there's all these boys coming over with Irish heritage, and the parents are saying, would you go and see if you can connect with a family when you're over there? So that really triggered it, and I thought, yeah, these lads are in plain sight. These are Irish lads. They're on the doorstep. They want to know about their heritage, and they're actually in the military forces. So that was one of my jumping off points. So let's see what's going to happen. What are we going to do? Nothing happens. Yes, great. We're doing well. So why do we do it? So we're looking at 20th century records. We're up against the 100-year rule before we start. If you're looking at British Army records, there's a 140-year moratorium on them. So we're looking really at a good distance of time. So we've got privacy laws, we've got GDPR to worry about as well. We've got lack of access to 20th century records online because of these rules. And each country has its own information. So depending on where our diaspora have gone, there's going to be different information available for them. Now, because of all the memorials that are happening over this next 100 years, the military records are coming out and we can use them, they're available. And they're giving us information in those records that probably we wouldn't be able to get anywhere else at the moment because of the privacy rules. The World War records, because of the nature of the combat, they're in modern English. So we're looking at English records and we can use that information to back up other sources. So if we find something in the military records, we can look elsewhere and get more information. Oh, no, it's away. So here we go. How do we start off? What do I need to do first? So before we jump in, identify who it is that we're looking for. So if it was Grandad's younger brother called Jim, it's not much of help really, is it? So what we've got to do is we've got to identify who it is we're looking for first. And then we've got to get that information that's on the ground here in Ireland. So we gather as much information as we can from the family. So we're going to other members of the family. Did you ever hear about Jim that went over to Australia and the sheep farming? And hopefully some of the cousins will come up with something. Oh yes, I saw something. So we're going to gather information that's already on the ground. We're going to go back to the Irish sources and we're going to get that birth record or the baptism record. Might even be a marriage record you're looking for. And gather it all together. And so we get a profile of that person. Then the bit that everybody, including me, forgets to do, have I got all my ducks lined up? Have I got all my records ready? Have I got my birth certificate? Have I got my parents' marriage certificate? My own official documents that belong to me? Because if we're going to be looking for a formal application for paperwork to one of the military sources, we've got to prove who we are first before they'll actually consider our application. So we need to get all those certificates ready. So that's the bit that I always forget to do. And I think, well, my birth certificate, I think is in a folder somewhere in the wardrobe, but I'm not sure. So pull it all out, get it sorted first. Right, so where do we start? Well, strangely enough, we can start at home actually, and we can look at what we've got in the military archives. And this is, I don't know whether you've been up to Clare recently. Mick O'Day's got a fantastic exhibition up there. And I was going past it and I thought, yes, I could use that. So I photographed it. But he's got the whole of the top floor of different images from the War of Independence. So go and have a look before it closes. So the militaryarchives.ie have got all information about the War of Independence. And this is where I've got the gossip now. So you're ready for it. So on the military archives, I went in to have a look and see what they got for the witness statements and the pension applications. And they've moved it all around again. So I was looking at it before Christmas and I thought I knew where everything was, and now it's been moved again. So just keep working at it and you'll get the information. So I started with the pension applicants. And in the pension applications, there are applications from Australia, New Zealand, Britain, Germany, New Zealand, South Africa, and other countries. So they are spread about. You're going to have, before you even start, you've got applications, international applications coming through, or in the USA as well. So I took a name that might be familiar to this area, which is O'Brien, and I started to have a look at what they got. So there's 51 applications for an O'Brien, and the Bryans are different. They're separate as well. There's a really good search engine. And I'll tell you a story first. You might know this person. I don't know whether you know them or not, but there was an application from a gentleman who was in the British Army, who was living in Ennis in County Clare, and he was driving, he had a taxi business. And what he said was he was in the British Army during the war and he was a driver. And anytime he got any rifles or equipment given to him, he used to drop part of them off in Ennis for the lads. And he put an application in. So I won't say what the name is because obviously it could be somebody in this room that's related to them. But you can have a look if you put in O'Brien and look for County Clare, you might see it pop up. I didn't find out whether he got any money or not, but the application to me was quite interesting. So I'm picking up now a lady called Mary O'Carroll, and she's called, and her maiden name was Gahan O'Garn, and she had a brother called Joseph. And she has, there's a link to actually Joseph's records, so the search engine is really good. And Mary O'Carroll had an application for disability pension in 1935. And she was living in Australia at Slievenamon, Bexley, New South Wales. It gives you a date of birth, a date of death, and the fact she has 10 children. It gives you the names and addresses of the referees for her application and the name and address of her Dublin solicitor, because obviously she's in Australia, so things, things are going to take a while to get from A to B. Now, the reason why she was asking for a disability pension was because she was actually part of the 1916 rising in Dublin. And she was also involved in hunger striking and she was imprisoned. So that was having a knock-on effect on her health. And that was why she was claiming the disability pension allowance. So I thought that was quite, straight away that pops up. She's a woman who's making a claim. And it took a long time, but they didn't actually give her a claim. They gave her an amount of the claim, and then she put in another claim in for the rest of it and got it. So that was really good. So that was the pension applications. So have a look in there. You can go and search by country. You can search by surname. The search engine is very sensitive. You can search by keyword if you want, like I did. Now, the next section is the witness statements. And this, again, you can search it by keyword. And I've got Patrick Joseph Whalen from County Cork, of course. And he's giving an account of what life was like in the Irish volunteers in Cove. And he said that the volunteers were being trained by ex-Army and ex-Navy, British Navy members. And he actually names one man called John Gard, who was saying, he says, you've got to lift your rifle up, let it drop down by itself, apparently. That's one of his jokes. And so you've got a name called John Gard, which means then you can go back into the British military records and you can find his records. You don't even need a service number or anything, but that's that name, then you can jump back into the British records and find out a bit more about him. The next one I was looking at was Michael McCoy from County Westmeath, and he was saying that they did a raid on the Munster and Leinster Bank for some reason, and they had a decoy, and his name was Hoey, and he used to be in the British Army, and he had a hackney business in Westmeath, and they had him as the decoy, so he was driving one way, and they were coming out the other way and getting into the back of the bank. So the names are there. Mr. Hoey has evidently got a service record with the British Army somewhere, and worth looking at. Right, so that's looking at military archives before we even leave the country. So I haven't been on this for a while. I keep an eye on them, but I haven't been on it for a while. I was amazed at the actual amount of material that's on here. So looking at World War I and World War II, and I'm calling them that because obviously in Ireland, we call it the emergency, but for the purposes of the records, we're looking at World War I and World War II records. And they hold the graves for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. This website holds all the information on the graves. So for World War I, there's 857 war dead called O'Brien. And there's also 429 for World War II, and they're O'Brien and Bryan. Now, what it is, it's an international website, and it covers all the war graves of the Allies. So it's not just the British military, Australian, South African, New Zealand, the whole of the Commonwealth allied troops are under this website. So that's easy to search. It actually narrows down the work you have to do. If they're actually involved in the conflicts and they die in the conflict, then you can track them here. So what we've got here is we've got Lance Corporal Joseph O'Brien, and he's in the Canadian Infantry, 101st Battalion. His memorial is actually in, his memorial says he's a son of Mr. D. O'Brien of St. Stephen's, New Brunswick. So you've got an address, you've got a name there that you can chase up. The Allied forces are the British Commonwealth as it stood in 1914 and 1939. So some of the countries had were conscripts, and some people took part in volunteers. Now, what I found was when I was originally searching before they updated the website was that the Irish lads who were buried in the Commonwealth war graves, they were down as place of birth unknown, because obviously the Free State was there. They didn't want to know that the Irish boys were volunteering for the Allies, and they were they were ghosted, if you like, that you didn't know that they were Irish because their place of birth was unknown. So I went through and I had looked for all the unknown soldiers, and there they were. Now what they've done now is they've taken off the place of birth. So all you've got is you've got the place and date of death. Now you haven't got the birth one. So it's been updated. So we've got Joseph O'Brien. What also it gives you is a date of death and the unit. So you can actually go then and look at what happened in his unit when he was active and his age. Sometimes they give you the age. For World War II, you've got a leading aircraft man, James O'Brien. He died in May 1945, which is just right on the end of the war. He was a Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, and he was buried in Brighton in England, where his parents lived, and he's a son of William and Margaret O'Brien. So you've actually got a place, you've got place to search, you've got names to search. The Civilian War Dead database, well, I didn't have time to look at, but I should imagine that would be very useful as well, because you're going to have people of different ages in there, in that database. Right, so that's your starting off point for anybody who's been involved in conflict and has died in conflict and registered. I've got invited into a project called In From the Cold, which is identifying soldiers who took part in the conflict who died as soldiers, as military, between 1914 and 1930 in Ireland. So they've taken part in the conflict, they've come back, and they've died possibly from the outcome of the war, and then they're buried, and obviously they're not showing up anywhere. So I've been quite happily sitting in Cork archives going through all the burial registers and looking for soldiers. So keeps me happy. So they are being gathered. They're not in the cold. They're in plain sight now, and we're doing great things with it. Right, so here we go. Let's see what else. So if we have them died in conflict, this is where we start, okay? Because you're going to have a record of them. There we go. Right, so if our relative he's died as part of the British forces, this is what's online for England, and I'll talk you through it. So the resources are spread across the country's archives. So the first one we're looking at is England and Wales, and that's the nationalarchives.gov.uk, which is everybody knows as Kew, that place in London. Unless if you've ever been to Kew or been around it, you know how big it is. It absolutely massive, and also the same applies to their website, and it would make you weep. So if you haven't got an account with them, I would say register before you even do anything else, because what I did was I went in and found something and thought, what I could do with that. And what you've got to do is download it, but you can't download it until you've got an account. And by the time you've sorted out your account, you've lost the link to whatever you wanted. So the word to the wise, just register and get it. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. Just register. And you never know what you might find. So the material on the National Archives is free and paid, depending on what you want. Now, what we're going to look at is the free stuff. So anybody knows me knows I'm a firm believer in free. So the England and Wales National Archives.gov.uk, register before using, for World War I is the First World War 100 site. So don't even bother looking for it, just put it in the search engine because you could end up all over the place. And that will give you, it's a portal and it'll give you the links out. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background to it. The World War I records, they are split between a set of records that were to do with service and then a set to do with pension applications and sickness. So if you were claiming for a pension or you had a medical background, those records were kept separately from the service records. Now, the service records got damaged during World War II. And it wasn't the bombs, it was the firemen afterwards that went in, they sprayed it with all water and made a lovely squishy mess. So they're called the burnt papers, but they didn't actually catch fire, they just got soaked. And I've looked at the burnt papers for my family, and I didn't get any joy. So I knew that the three lads served, and I was looking for them and they weren't there. So my lads' records, two of the lads' records are in the burnt paper somewhere. And from what I can gather, looking actually, they're on microfilm, is that it's certain regiments were more damaged than others. So there are some up there, but it looks like the regimental, they must have been stored by a regiment, and some regiments didn't make it. The index is by surname alphabetically. So you know straight away if you've got them or not, you know, they turn up or they don't. So the burnt papers may be all useful, but what we do use is we use the medal index cards, and they were kept separate again. They were, I think it was 1923. I'm not sure, I think it's 23. And those medal index cards are pretty comprehensive, except that when they came to put the index together, somebody had a hissy fit, and that's not quite accurate as it could be. So you've got to work your way through it, because I actually contacted the National Archives about another relative, and I said, he should be on this list, which one is he? And he said, I don't know. He said, because that section, somebody transcribed as the same surname. So they're all the same surname in the different names. So he said, just keep going. keep at it and you find them. So the medal index cards is the one you want. Now they're free, but you have to download them, which is where I fell into it, where I hadn't registered and then I had to, you know. So you download a free image, and once it hits your email address, you can open it, and that's yours to keep forever. Okay, they're all free, but you do have to register first. So what it gives you is, here we are. It gives you the place of birth. It gives you the service number, which is the one that you need. You have to go for this service number. Is actually the one thing you need out of any material information you get. And it gives you the current address in 1922 when they make the application in for the medals. So on the National Archives 100, what they're also including is the Merchant Navy, which they haven't done before. Merchant Navy's always been kept separate. And they're now on that website too, which, as you know, from looking at an Irish perspective, the Merchant Navy basically was run by the Irish. So all these records now are available on this website. And I've pulled at Robert O'Brien, born Liverpool, but his place of birth was Liverpool, and his number, RSN number, and his address. So I can go to his address and I can have a look and see what he's up to. So that's the National Archives medal index. So keep looking. If you can't actually find your lad, and they will all be men, just keep looking and see if you can narrow it down. You can pull down as many images as you want. You can pull them all down, have a look at them, and with a bit of luck, you might get a bit lucky with it. So including on this National Archives 100, I was very pleased to see a lot of women's records now, which haven't been available before. So the Women's Auxiliary Corps, the WACs, the nurses are on there, World War I nurses, the women combatants, and the Merchant Navy I've just spoken to. Right, so I've got that on there, yeah, that's right. So once you've worked your way through that, then you can go on to findmypast.co.uk and look at the 1921 census. And you can find the ones who survived, you can find their families, and you can find out what's happened to them. I mean, even if you find that you've got a combatant who's died during the actual war and is on the Commonwealth War Graves, you can know that information and go and see if they've got any relatives left on that address. So that 1921 census is actually, you're shooting that one up. The information there, you've got two sources now to work with and play with. So what is good about the British one, the Great Britain conscription of 1916 was taking everybody. So you're pulling everyone up. Before then, it was volunteers. So two of my great-granddad volunteered and his brother volunteered in 1914 straight away. My great-uncle was only 5'2", so he said, yes, very nice, but we can't use you at the moment. But by 1916, the 5'2s and the 5'1s were very, very important, and they got in there and they got a job. Another conscription in 1918 for Great Britain. And as you'll know, in Ireland, the great opposition to conscription meant that the Irish boys were not involved unless they were volunteers or they were already serving members of the forces. So you can't guarantee that you're going to get an Irish perspective, but you will get anybody living on the island of in Great Britain in 1916 is going to actually be in these records. So having done that, and I just told you that my great-granddad and my great-uncle's records, we knew they served, but we couldn't find them. The local archives in England carry a lot of material. So if you can find any information on the other sites that will give you even a county location, you can go to them and you can ask and see if they've got something called the absent voters list. Now, this is coming up to an election, obviously, end of the war election. Most of the serving soldiers were actually still serving in 1919. So when they had the wives and the families had to fill in the election papers to apply for their election card, they had to include the lads who were still serving, and these are called the absent voters. Now, I had a very happy dance because what happened was that my grandmother and my great aunt actually wrote down where they were serving, service number, and unit. Got the three. So there's no other way I would have got that information because that information was in the burnt papers. And so the service record didn't exist anymore. So I did actually, all the stories were all true. What they said happened. Okay. So the absent voters list, most of the counties carry them, but a lot of them, mine fortunately was online, but other counties, you might have to apply to them. So if you've worked out so far which county your family are in, you can contact the local archive and say, can you have a look on the absent voters for me? What information is on it? The other thing is that you'll get civil defence volunteers. So the lads and families who couldn't serve or were too old to serve, who joined the civil defence, then those records are actually in the local archive as well. So you do really well if you've got your place of address. Right, so the news isn't as good for World War II, I'm afraid. There's a lovely the help, you will need it, help with your research for the Second World War. I'll give you the link there. So this is 1939 to 1948. What you start with is the 1939 register in findmypast.co.uk. Hopefully you'll find them in there. It'll give you the date of birth, it might give you a place of birth, and it'll give you the family names. So, and this is in England. So you have a look in there, then listen to this. Right, so the service records for World War II are held by the Ministry of Defence, and they are moving them to the National Archives bit by bit, which means they are not available at the moment. So what is happening is that the serving soldiers in the army, all their records should be available at the National Archives by March 2024. So that's just the serving soldiers. The officers are different. So which means that they're actually in transit, and they've got to be managed at the MOD, and then they've got to be managed again at the National Archives. So they are still at the MOD. The other records, if I can find the list, the other records, the Royal Air Force and the Navy records, they're staying at the MOD for the time being. So what we have to do is we have to make a request to the MOD for service papers via gov.uk. All the information's on there. There is 140-year moratorium on them. So anything younger than 140 years is going to be only available to next of kin, which is where your records come in. So you can claim, if you are vaguely next of kin, you can put a claim in. It's quite easy, but you need either the service number, which you will have got from your other records, or the date of birth, which you can get from the 1939 register. And you can put your claim in. It takes about 12 months at the moment. And I think COVID has slowed it down even further. But it would be worth doing if you've got that information and you are next of kin, it'd be worth doing. Okay, so the gov.uk, MOD, you get your copies of your service records from them. So the information is all on number 1, which is the National Archives help sheet. Okay, so that's, you'd think because Great Britain was the jumping off point that all the information would be there, and it's quite frustrating, I think. I think you can't just go in and get it. So England and Wales are in queue. Scotland is under Scotland's people.gov.uk, and their website is nrsscotland.gov.uk. So Scotland's people is the portal that we use for research. Northern Ireland obviously is part of the UK after 1920, so their records are all now in Belfast. So you've got 2 more archives to work with. So hopefully, a couple of slides ago, you've actually got your location. Hope, you know, if not, just keep at it. So Scotland's people.gov.uk, they've got a 1921 census index and images on their website, but it's separate from the 21 census in England and Wales. They've got a lovely set that's just gone up of the Women's Land Army in Scotland for World War II. And if you think of some of your girls from this side of the country, might have gone up through to Glasgow for work and then got stuck and ended up in the, you know, and applied to the Land Army. You know, the working girls on the farm, that might be the way they go. So they might be worth looking at. What Scotland's people have got is you can actually track people on the rates, on the location up to 1946. Now, I'll put a caveat on that because I've got family in Edinburgh that I've been tracing, and I've got records up to 1960 of where they live. So that you might find you can roll in a bit further there. And Scotland's People website is really easy to use. It's good. You could even put a surname in and see what happens. You know, it's very, very sophisticated search engine. It's very reasonable to use, and you only pay for what you want. So you buy what you want off the website. Now, the bad news is that the 1939 register is only searchable by visiting the National Archives, Scotland and Edinburgh. So if you fancy a weekend in Edinburgh, you could do that while you're at it. So it's not available online. Prony in Belfast, I've given you the link there to have a look at their website. It's a lovely website. Bad news is you can't even get a look at the register. You've got to request specific information from it and they will send it back to you. So you've got to know who you're looking for before you start asking questions. There's no 1921 census, obviously, because we didn't have a 21 census in Ireland. And the North was part of the South when there should have been a census. It's all very very complicated. So there's no 1921 census, but the good news is that online you can have a great time going through all the rates books up to 1933 and see who owned and who was living at a particular address. So if you've picked up your address way back, you can go on there and have a look and see who was living in Belfast, down by the docks in 1933. And you can see how it might even be like, you know, husband to wife to son. You might even get that family group there. Right, so have I got any gossip? Right, so the gold star to the Allied Forces websites is Canada. And I had a lovely time with this. It is so straightforward, so simple, and stuff's available. So what you want is the Library Archives Canada CA and the databases, and they're all on the same page. So you don't have to go and look for them. They're brilliant. So what we've got in Canada available, I'll just go through quickly. There was no conscription until 1917 in Canada. So everybody you've got in the Canadian Forces were volunteers. And then again in World War II, 1940 was the conscription date for them, and that was for home conscription. So it was for the army on the ground at home in Canada. So everyone you're looking for is going to be a volunteer up to 1917. So what we've got in Canada is we've got service files, we've got war graves, we've got the diaries, the ops books, the operation books, the medal rolls. So it's all there. World War I, World War II, and we're on slide 8. Right, now this is my golden find of the day, this one. I was so pleased with this. I made a bit of a show of myself in the library. So World War I, John O'Brien, AKA Michael John Bryan with a Y. He's got an alias, you've got 2 names to look for. Born 1882, Limerick, is served with the 11th Regiment of the Canadian Mounted Rifles, so he's a Mountie, so it gets even more glamorous. It gives you his registration number, his next of kin in Limerick, and his previous service. It asks for previous military service, and he's done 5 years in the Munster Fusiliers. So what information there? I mean, I just hope this guy wasn't on the run, you know, because we can find him quite easily now. And I think he survived the war. I think he did. I didn't get a chance to go all the way through, but it looked like he was a bit of a survivor. As well as all that information, you get a full description of what he looked like. So his height, hair colour, eyes. And I think he had tattoos as well. I was getting quite beside myself at one point. He had tattoos down one arm as well, and it lists all the tattoos. So that's John O'Brien. So if he's on the run, he's been found. So what else have we got? We've got what's Australia? Right. So World War II. Oh yes, I know what happened here. Right. So World War I, you can search. You can pull up who you like. John O'Brien had an 11-page service record for me to play with. So plenty of information, freely given, evidently. So you can go through there. You can search. The search is really easy on it. World War II. That now you've got, there is a service records database for deaths up to 1947. I didn't get a chance to look at that. So there are evidently service papers on there. And then you then apply to Canadian government for service records from them with all your new documents that you found. Having done that, you can then find out what they're up to on the 1921 and 1931 census. You can find out if they survived on the 1921 census and went back home, and then on the 1931 census, then you can then look forward and see what they were doing before they volunteered for the British services. So I definitely, if you've got a Canadian relative, you'd be doing pretty well there. There's plenty there to look at. Right. Now then. All right, so anybody know about what the Anzacs stand for? Australia, New Zealand. Oh, thank you. I was hoping somebody'd know. Right, so they are but basically the volunteers for World War I, and we all know what happened. You know that they've gone down in glory for what they went through. They are Australia. use that record that you link there, and you will use a thing called record search, and that will give you World War One is still digitized. World War II have the record cards, and you've got to order World War II again because of the privacy. But what World War II record cards have got, they've got photographs. So you've got a photograph of your person with your service record, which is worth doing. So for Australia, for the O'Briens, evidently went to, they were a bit of a feature in Australia, 1,992 hits on the Australian records, but it does include court-martial files. So more than one of them got court-martialed, I'm afraid. So World War One, Daniel John O'Brien, born Clare, County Tipperary, gives you his wife's name, his enlistment place, and his home address. He's 47 when he joins. He's got an 11-page service record, and he survived. I rolled forward to see what happened to him, and it actually survived. So that's him. The new, what else you can do with, there's an excellent, you probably know it already, Trove, the newspapers, free on the same website. There will be records of what those boys are up to, abroad, overseas. And there will, unfortunately, probably will be deaths as well recorded for people who didn't make it. So use the Trove with these records. Now, New Zealand they've got a policy of privacy for their community. All the censuses are pulped. As soon as they've been gathered, the statistics are pulped. So you can understand that the New Zealand records are not going to be as easy to get hold of. So you've got a research guide for the war records there, and you have to apply, basically you have to apply for everything that you want. Family search is always worth doing and having a look. I also got very lucky with family search with my New Zealand, my Anzac lad. I got some stuff off that, well, I wasn't expecting it, but he did actually turn up. And I'll tell you the story now. So my grandmother's cousin in New Zealand, everything. They emigrated during the cotton famine, and they settled in New Zealand. And he popped up. I found him. Oh, great! Got him. Edward Waring, lovely. Got his war record up. Ancestry. I did really well that day. And then I put him in Google, and he was involved in the 1916 rising in Dublin. And the story is totally unbelievable. Is that he was with a guy called Burke, and they had evidently got some free time before they went over to France, and they decided to go to Dublin. And I reckon this Burke guy was coming to look for his relatives, like he was told to do. And he was an Australian. And the shooting started on this Monday. And they thought, well, we're in uniform, we better go and see what's going on. So they were going through trying to look for some authority, and people were going, oh, the Germans have arrived, the Germans. So they thought the Dubliners thought the Germans had landed, because obviously they were in their Australian and New Zealand gear. Anyway, they turn up and they find some officials in Trinity College. So they join the officials in Trinity College, and they're up there defending Trinity College against the rabble, the rising. And they do very well, and they're there for 5 days, and they do the 3 days, and then they come back to England, and obviously then go off to France. There is no record of these guys in Dublin. It never happened, right? There's nothing, the British government never happened, nothing, except that the British Pathé film newsreel, which was filming the 1916 Rising, gets them on the top of Trinity College, where the roof is, where it comes forward, with the guns shooting at the rebels. So the 3 lads, actually, they get a silver cup given to them in recognition of their defence of the university. And the whole story is there, but in plain sight, never happened. Nothing in the records at all. I think they managed to get somebody in the War Office to say, well, if they were on furlough and they weren't here, then obviously we've no record of what they're up to. So that's the plane. That's my story. Edward Waring, but it's great. I mean, they've actually got these. They're walking around, you know, with the hat, you know, the Australian hat, wandering around. But I don't know whether this fella Burke actually found his relatives or not. But it's a good story. So that's my story about the New Zealand archives. Right. Now, I've included South Africa because basically there's so many Irish people living in South Africa. There was a positive movement, people coming over, businesses coming over to Ireland and getting the middle managers to emigrate and settle in South Africa, about 1880, 1890. Huge population there of Irish South Africans. So I've included them. Now, they are Commonwealth Free State from 1902. So I understood in my head that, oh, they're going to be involved in the conflict. But because the politics was so unstable in South Africa, because as you would know, half of the white South Africans are of British background, the other half will be Dutch and German. So it will be very difficult for whoever is in South Africa to make a decision one way or the other. Plus the fact that at that time, South Africa was part of the British Empire. So it should have been, they were theoretically involved in the conflict. So what you've got is you've got a lot of volunteering going on. The permanent forces of South Africa, based in South Africa. And so you've got volunteers on the ground from all the communities. And then you've got volunteers to Commonwealth services. Now, what they said was very difficult because they would only arm the white South Africans. So it made it very difficult to actually give a proper support to whatever was going on. So I don't know whether any black South Africans were involved in the conflict, but I'd be very interested to find out if they were. So the best place I can send you is to the South African Military History Organisation, because again, South Africa have got a policy of keeping their records private. So you've got to know a way through to get the information. But Family Search has got a lot of wills and deaths and land records for South Africa. It's only gone up the last couple of years. So it would definitely be worth looking there if you're looking for your family in South Africa. That's that. Right. So we've done the Allies, we've done the British Allies, and then who have we missed? Who's missing? I only saw this last week. It was just brilliant. Right. So the USA were pulled in fairly late. And what have we got for them? Right. Oh, yes. So they came into the war quite late in World War I, 1917, and in World War II, 1940. So we've got they're not conscripts, but they were drafted, and we would know about drafting from the Vietnam War. It's a similar situation. So what I'm saying to you is the boys came over and they were jumping off from England. So that was their leaving place. So a lot of the USA records are going to be in the local archives. There's going to be a lot of information in local archives in England if you can find out where they were based. And the US bases were quite notorious, so I should imagine it would be quite easy to narrow it down if you've got somebody who knows come over, one of your relatives from the US. So this is a group called the British Commonwealth Forces, and they've got some fabulous stuff on there. There's a lot of individual material on there. And I like this one because this is Sergeant Leo Frank Tietman Jr. enjoying a sandwich and coffee at RAF Kimbolton in Cambridgeshire. And he's just completed his first combat mission with the USAF Bomber Command. And the photograph was taken on the 31st of December, 1943. This put this guy exactly on that date where he was. It was an amazing photograph. And I also like the fact he's having a nice cup of coffee, but he's in the size of the cup. You should imagine he would have needed that amount of caffeine after that excitement. And you can see the lads behind him, all the different types of combat gear. And that photograph tells you so much about that experience for them. The other thing is that you've got an RAF base there in Cambridgeshire that you can chase. The other thing is that everybody I've ever spoken to or met from the US who's a veteran can tell you exactly about the pubs they visited and about the people they visited. So you've got all that information, the local pubs, you'll have photographs up of the boys on their reunions. All that information there is in plain sight. You can go and have a look, you know, once you know you're looking, you're off, you know, you're great. So that's the good news. So, going back to the Commonwealth War Graves website, that's for the Allied Commonwealth. Okay, and that includes your South Africans. There are South Africans on there, and the rest of the volunteers. So the corresponding website for the American US military is the American Battle Monuments Commission, which is at abmc.gov. And that is a corresponding, it gives a corresponding provision for you. So what you've got on there is, you've got all the burials international, apart from the ones that are buried in the US. And it includes the Korean and Vietnam burials. So you can even roll your family even further if you needed to. It gives you the death date, the unit. You might have a service number. Some I found with service numbers, some didn't. So it's not quite as comprehensive as the CWC. So you've got that to work with. I would know the American cemetery outside Cambridge, and it is massive, and that's one of their biggest ones. And all those boys are logged, documented. So there's a phenomenal amount of information that's on that website even before you start. So what have we got here? Right, so the archives.gov, which is the US archives, their military records is down below here. This is all on a need-to-know basis, all their material. It's a very good web page. It tells you exactly what you can and can't do and how to do it. So you need to look at that first. Where we really score with the US is on Family Search, which you've got the draft cards up. So it was the drafts were, as I would understand it from the Vietnam War, is that everybody's was put in to a system, and then you came out and you were either chosen for combat or you weren't. So theoretically, I think everybody of a certain age should have a draft card. And I have got the dates here. So the draft was in 1917 to 1918 for World War I, and then 1940 to 1945. And every state had a different system, as you would understand. So if you know your state, then obviously then you can narrow it down, but the search engine in Family Search is just amazing. So you can go straight in and do it. So I've got John J. Bryan, born Galway for World War I. He was drafted in Boston. He's a single man, gives his address and his physical description. So if you're looking for John Bryan in Boston, narrow it down a bit, but he was born in Galway. So that's your World War I draft card. It's an original document. You can open it, you can download it, and you can have a look at the handwriting and everything. It's brilliant. World War II, and this is my piece de resistance. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. Patrick Joseph O'Brien, born in County Clare, March the 16th, 1895. So any thoughts there before we start? So it's a bit, his wife is called Emma, and he was drafted in New York State. It gives his occupation and his physical description. So if you're missing a Patrick Joseph Bryan off your tree, born about 1895, you might want to have a look at that record. I won't go any further with it, but it's quite an interesting one. So your draft cards are there. You've got the 1920 census to pick up any the people who survived or didn't go from the World War I, and you can track them right through to 1950. So 1940, you hopefully could match up the draft card to the 1940 census, and then pick them up again in 1950. So it's really tight. You're getting really tight research going on there. So that's them. So what do we do next? So we're all fired up now and excited. So first thing we do is identify who you're looking for in your family, get as much information as you can here in the ground on the Irish records and in the family. Make sure I've got all my records ready to go. Find out the country of adoption. So hopefully you get some sort of a hint from the family of they went to New Zealand. Then, we get letters every so often, or we get a Christmas card from, Christchurch or whatever. That's sort of like the stories there that you're going to get from your family. So that'll narrow it down a little bit. Use your census and your military records together, work them together. And so you'll get your home address, you get the families, you'll get the children. And then the unknown, I always think if there's nothing about that person, it's always worth looking and just have a little bit of a rummage. As I say, the World War II British combatants, the Irish were invisible. They were recognised, but they weren't recognised as Irish people. You look at the records may not pick up that they're Irish when you do the search. So look for, you work on the surname and then work through and look for the Irish people. As I've said, from looking at, because of the nature of the conflict, much of the information is going to be in the English records. And I would definitely say, when in doubt, ask an archivist. That's it.
Listen, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. That was very informative. A huge number of websites to look through and lots of different information and all. So thanks very much, everyone, for your attendance. And I hope you got something useful out of the talk. And thanks to Anne-Marie for coming all the way up today from Youghal in this very cold weather. Our next meeting is on the, I want to say the 15th of February. We have Michael Talty, who is the new senior librarian at the local studies center, who will be speaking to us on preservation of documents. Michael worked for many years as an archivist with RTE. He has a lot of very good information on archiving your personal collections, the things that you can do to preserve photographs and letters, et cetera. It's very interesting and well worth attending. So safe home, everyone, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good night now.